So welcome everyone. We are grateful here on this Friday to Suman and I to welcome our guest Soumaya Khalifa today. And so we, as always, have created this safe space for everyone to join in, have some conversation, and hopefully some education and community around these important topics on race. And so I'm super grateful today, as is Suman, to welcome Soumaya Khalifa. I'll just tell you a little brief bit about her, and then I'll allow her to add on to that. But I just want to reiterate before that this is a safe space. So we want you to feel welcome to ask your questions, whether that's in the chat or live. Please feel free to unmute yourself and just to be respectful of each other, understanding that we all come from different perspectives. And we really want this to be a safe space for us all to learn and grow together as community. For anyone who's watching us on the replay, we appreciate you too, and don't want you to think we forgot about you either. So I definitely want to just share about Soumaya. So she is president and CEO of Khalifa Consulting. She is an American Muslim of Egyptian origin with a career in human resources and a consulting practice. So she specializes in intercultural communications, leadership development, and corporate diversity. Her organization, Khalifa Consulting, provides Fortune 100 companies, nonprofit organizations, and governmental institutions with wide-ranging expertise and practical solutions to cross-cultural operations in the Arab world and the U.S., collaborating with a team of top-level diversity and inclusion experts. She offers training and coaching, which includes understanding the diversity and cultures of Arab Americans, intercultural communication, managing a cross-cultural team, cultural competency for law enforcement, and keys to success as a woman in the executive Arab world. Since 2009, she's also been an adjunct faculty member at Emory, and she teaches in the Continuing Education Center there, the Human Resources Certification. So there is so much more to this wonderful woman, but I don't want to steal her thunder and would love for her to tell us a little bit more. Today she's going to talk to us about Muslims and reasonable accommodations in the workplace. So I will kick it over to you, Soumaya, if you want to share more about that, and we'll get things rolling today.
Wonderful. Tiffany, thank you so much. Suman, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a real honor and pleasure. And, you know, as we are meeting today marks a holiday for our Jewish brothers and sisters. It is the Rosh Hashanah, which is their new year. So I just want to wish them Shana Tova. May they have a very healthy, happy, and sweet new year, and for all of us as well. You know, I grew up in corporate America. I was in corporate America for many years doing human resources, compensation, diversity and inclusion, and the whole 9 yards. And at one point, my organization that I was with for about 15 years went from being a publicly traded company to a private company held by two brothers, and no names shall be said here. So anyways, so my whole organizational effectiveness was kind of, you know, gone overnight. And I wanted to bring my whole self to what I do and bring the passion that I bring, both from my experience in the workplace as well as my own personal identity. And this is when I went into the intercultural world, and also using human resources as a very strong backbone to that. So I get to talk to people about people who are like me, what it's like to have them in the workplace, and what are the reasonable accommodations. A lot of times when we look at diversity and inclusion, it's race, it's gender, and maybe age. But all the other layers of diversity are not really that much welcome in the workplace. And religion is something that's near and dear to many people's identity. It makes them who they are. It's their moral compass. But as employer, we tell them, hey, we want the whole of you, but by the way, leave your religion at the door when you come into our premises, which is not really bringing the whole person. There's been a lot of studies ongoing about when people feel validated, they feel welcome, then they feel like they belong. And so this is the whole concept about accommodations. And on top of that, we have Title VII that says don't discriminate against people because of all the different classes. And not only that, but what are the reasonable accommodations that employers can provide to their employees. So that's a little bit more about who I am and what I do, and the passion that I bring to all my clients talking about that. And I could tell you stories upon stories.
Great. So one question I have, and this touches, as you know, within HR, a lot of times employers struggle, and I know you and I have had some conversation about this, about what does it look like when someone is asking for an accommodation? Do they need to ask? What is an employer's responsibility? I feel like sometimes there is a barrier there where employers may think that they have a lot more to do in this space, and they overcomplicate it because they're unsure. So what would you tell an employer who maybe needs to make some accommodations, or where would you advise that they start?
Sure. So, knowledge is a very strong skill set that managers should have. And I've seen it with my clients where I go into an organization and they have Muslim employees and they say, well, they're asking for time to do the prayers, the 5 daily prayers. And I just tell them to take it whenever they need to, right? And when we look at the prayers, and there are 5 pillars that Muslims, practicing Muslims, need to do, and that includes, that impacts the workplace, the 5 daily prayers, the month of Ramadan when they're fasting, and also when they go on pilgrimage. So those are the 3 things that really impact or could have an impact on the workplace. Before I go there, I want to also mention that just like any other faith tradition, not all Muslims are practicing. There is a concept in people's mind, if a person is a Muslim, they look a certain way, they walk a certain way, they talk a certain way. But the Muslim community, according to Gallup, is the most diverse religious community in the United States. And so knowing about who they are, knowing about their faith tradition, knowing about what are the practices. And I've had managers and supervisors, after they've gone through a training, they say, well, I have an employee, his name is Muhammad, and I'm going to go to him and say, hey, Muhammad, I have a prayer place for you now. And I said, no, hold it. You don't go and tell people that you have a prayer place for them, because they might not be praying. Not all Muslims pray. It's the same as Christians or Jews or any other faith tradition. Not everybody adheres to everything that they need to do within a religion. So that is a form of diversity within the group as well. So, the knowledge piece, and then after the knowledge, what do they do with it? So let's take, for instance, the 5 daily prayers, and they're morning, midday, late afternoon, sunset, and night prayer, right? And the idea is for Muslims to do the prayers within the time frame window. So if, for instance, it's their noon prayer, it's actually now between about 1:15 till about 4:30. So if somebody is working, they have this window of opportunity to perform their prayers. If they do have breaks, then that's when they do the prayers. But, for employees, do not offer extra breaks for people to do their prayers. Work within your already set up system of lunches and prayers, and let them figure out when do they want to do the prayer. The other accommodation for the prayer is to have a clean, dry, private place, whether it's a conference room or a back of a warehouse or whatever. But it's got to be safe, it's got to be dry, it's got to be private, so people can pray, because when Muslims pray, they believe they're in direct communication with God. The other thing in regards to prayer is that when Muslims do pray, they have to purify their body. And there is it's called an ablution, where they go into the bathroom, they wash their private parts after using the bathroom, they will rinse their hands, their mouth, their face, their arms, their forehead, their neck, and their feet. And then they kind of purified themselves to be go into prayer. So what accommodation would the employer provide for the employees? And I've heard before where it becomes a safety issue. After they've done the water, then there could be water on the floor. So the employer needs to communicate that, hey, we understand what you need to do, but let's keep the bathroom safe. So those are just some of the examples about, the prayer as it impacts those who do pray during the workday.
So I have a question.
Sure.
In listening to all of this, there's a lot when it comes to those accommodations, right? There are a lot of things to prepare for and to think about. So as a praying Muslim, Are there fears around asking for those accommodations? And how do employers create that safe space? Because I'm listening to all of this and I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a praying Muslim, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all this and I'm saying, oh my gosh, that's really a lot for me to ask for, even though I know I should get that. So how do we as employers and staff sort of overcome that thought process?
Yeah, and it's the word that you said, creating a safe environment for everyone to be who they are. You know, I know Muslims who will go to their car and pray in their car because they don't want to make a big deal. When you look at the political climate that we're in right now, the Muslim ban, a lot of times, you know, a lot of times when I talk to people, I say, okay, what are the first words that come to mind when you hear the words Muslim and Islam, right? And guess what is the number one thing that comes out of people's mouth? Terrorist. Terrorists, and then women are oppressed. So the overall environment for Muslims right now is not all that great. There is and it seeps into everywhere, like the workplace, just out in public. A lot of times people see me with my headscarf and etc., and they think that, hey, she's not American, she doesn't speak English, and they would look at me and say, can I help you? And, you know, I drum up my deepest Southern accent and just say, hey, well, thank you so much, but I really, you know, I'm okay right now. I'll come to you if I need anything. Thank you. Right. And so it's people are so programmed to unfortunately, to have that perception about Muslims. And again, in the workplace, it's the same thing. People might not feel welcome. Maybe they're not being treated because so many around them might have unconscious biases. And so, I mean, it's really complicated. It's up to employers and organizations to create a culture to make everyone welcome. Because as we look at our demographics in the US, our demographics are changing drastically. And every, you know, ethnicity that you could think of in the world is here. Every religious practice or none is here. So if an employer wants to be able to attract and retain and develop the top talent, they need to create a culture that is welcoming. Now, I want to make a very strong distinction here. When we say a culture that's welcoming and bringing religion into the workplace, employees have to be very clear that they are there to work and to help the organization move on its strategic planning goals, right? It's not a church, it's not a mosque, it's not whatever. You know, we are not going to be bringing our Bibles and our Qurans and whatever different texts, and we're going to be arguing about who's right or who's wrong. This is going to be a red line. So they need to make sure that they set the parameters, creating a welcoming culture, creating the parameters, and you know, making sure that everything is enforced.
So how do we, you know, when we talk about the morale of the workplace and, you know, kind of always in the spirit of engagement and making sure that employees are understanding difference, that they're working well together, they're able to collaborate and feeling comfortable to do so, what does that look like? Like, what would you say are some best practices to help people understand? I think sometimes the go-to is, hey, let's have, you know, an ethnic or cultural food day, or let's just like pin something up, you know, on a particular day, but then it doesn't continue and it doesn't stick, right? So what can employers do, and how can employees help support each other on this journey?
Right. So, you know, when people know how to do diversity and inclusion in one area, they need to take the best practices that they've used and has worked for them and kind of take it and, you know, copy and paste in all different categories of diversity and inclusion. Some of the things that are visible, for instance, their website, does it include, what does it include? What kind of images do they have? In the workplace, what kind of images do they have to represent their company? What are the values? Are they really walking the walk with the values, or just talking them? Because if they're just talking them, it's not going to be valuable. It's going to be used against them. You know, if I'm saying that I treat people with dignity and respect as a value, as an organization, and then an employee feels like he or she is not treated that way, that becomes a problem. That becomes an issue. So the visibility of showcasing who they are, and that's part and parcel of their persona out in, whether it's literature about the organization or their website, whatever it is, they need to make sure that diversity is there. They also need to make sure from a religious standpoint that holidays are celebrated. I mean, if they celebrate all the holidays, they're going to be, Christmas tree throughout the year, but it's to acknowledge the holidays, maybe saying our Muslim or our Hindu or our Jewish employees, we wish them a very sweet and happy and blessed new year, and to put that out. So people are acknowledged, people are validated. And it doesn't really take much. And when we talk about the religious accommodation for the prayers, for instance, it's doable. It's doable. It could be, the conference room is going to be available to you from 1 to 1:30, and you could do that. Or maybe the office and they close the door, their cubicle, for the bathroom. So all the things that I just talked about, they don't cost money. And they are, if the employer works with their employees, it's very, it's not hard to do. Let me tell you a story. So not too long ago, I went to a client, and about 25% of their employees are Muslims. And I was doing an audit and to see what's going on in their environment. First of all, I go to the cafeteria, and the HR person who was taking me around said, by the way, all our food here is halal. And halal for Muslims is very similar to kosher for Jewish people. And I look, and all it says was chicken and beef, right? And I said, why don't you put the word halal in front of these? Because that's a visual that people need to see. And she says, well, we've been doing it for so long, people know. I said, it doesn't matter. You're going to be bringing in new employees, and it's in the best interest, give yourself credit when credit is due. Make sure that you write that on there. Another company was going to be doing religious accommodation, and they wanted to specify a room for people to go pray in. And the general manager was taking me around very proud, and here's this room, we're going to convert it into a multi-purpose room. And I said, what are you going to use it for? And he said, part of it is going to be exercise equipment for our employees, and then the second part will be for people praying. And he was getting ready to pay thousands of dollars to make that accommodation. And again, they were very proud of themselves that they're doing this, they're going the extra mile. And I said, I'm so sorry, but I have some bad news for you. That just does not fly. People exercising, wearing exercise clothes, people are praying. It doesn't matter what faith tradition they're in, but you can't combine the two together. And listening to the employees is another key point, right? If I am going to provide accommodations for you, I need to make sure that those are appropriate accommodations. Because that example of that general manager, it was going to be tens of thousands of dollars to make that room. And then it wouldn't have really filled any purpose at all. The Muslims there would not have gone to do their prayers there. Another big topic in terms of accommodations for Muslims is Ramadan. And Ramadan is an annual month where Muslims fast from dawn to sunset. And, and what do employers do? Well, first of all, they need to be aware that it's a fasting month for Muslims. Managers need to know that as well. And the lunar calendar, the Islamic calendar, is based on the lunar calendar. So every year it's 11 days earlier. Just to give you an example, in 2021, Ramadan starts on around May the 13th. Okay. In 2022, it will be around May the 3rd. And the reason I'm saying around is because Muslims, again, follow the cycle of the moon, just like our Jewish brothers and sisters do. And this is when a new month is decided by if a new moon was born. So what do they do? What if it's a production facility? How do they accommodate people? There is a safety component to it. If they are a 24/7 operation and they're Muslim employees, break their fast around 8, 9 o'clock at night. What do they do? I was doing some consulting with a large chain, and we talked about that, and they just did not know how to validate and support their Muslim employees. And it was very simple. You know, the suggestion that I gave them, do you sell dates and do you sell water? And they said, yes, we sell both. I said, you know, if you put dates and water in the break room, that will be very much appreciated, because Muslims break their fast on dates and water. And so it's very simple solution that didn't cost them much of anything. And what was very, very satisfying for me is a couple years later, I went in and to see how, you know, how they progressed. And it turned out that they did that, and not only in that particular store, but across the region, where they know when it's Ramadan and they bring out the dates and the water. And they say, they told me that can't tell you how much the Muslim employees were happy and appreciative of us providing those for them. So again, it doesn't cost much, but just the gesture, just understanding, talking to the employees and seeing what the needs are is really huge. It goes a long way. I care about you as an employee, and I want to see how we could collaborate to make the work culture something that you feel like you belong in.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
Please
yes.
do.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, hi, good morning, everyone. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. And Soumaya, thank you so much. You put it on LinkedIn, and I really wanted to come today to be here. And I loved what you just said. You know, it's just little things. And, you know, being a Muslim woman, having grown up here in the US, and, you know, I may be quote unquote Americanized or, you know, whatever, but I still believe in my culture. And I wish so I'm going to just like give my experience, share my experience. I wish everyone, you know, Merry Christmas, Rosh Hashanah, whatever. I hardly ever get a Eid Mubarak, Happy Ramadan, or anything. And then, and matter of fact, I'm going to write the president as well about this, because at the university, they send out a holiday schedule. I don't see Eid tentative. I don't see Ramadan tentative. I see all the Jewish holidays. I see all the Christian holidays. But if you're being inclusive, you're not being inclusive.
Yes, absolutely. Rabina, that is such an important point. Thank you so much for bringing it up. Yes, so, you know, acknowledging your employees, for the Hindu employees, for the Buddhist employees, for all employees, right? So it should not be just, you know, Christian and then maybe Jewish. And we really...
In this particular case, even the Hindu holidays were up there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, they're trying to be a little bit more inclusive. That's good. They're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, my mother just passed away recently, so I haven't had a chance to emotionally put a lot of stuff into writing an email and, you know, talking about if we're going to be inclusive, like what's missing here, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a responsibility on the employees as well, right? If we don't speak up as employees and say to our employer, guess what? I really appreciate if you could tell us, you know, share about our holidays, and here's our holiday schedule. How can we help you? And here are the Muslim employees that you have. And Rina, I'm so sorry about your mom, and my prayers and thoughts are with you. I know it's a hard situation. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, if we're going to be inclusive, that we need to make sure that we are inclusive. And I think a lot of Muslims are just afraid to speak up or say anything to be retaliated against, so they don't say anything and stand up for themselves. Thank you. Thank you for who you are, and you know, you're a role model and an inspiration, and I really just want to acknowledge you, and, you know, thank you. Growing up, like, there wasn't a lot of women, you know, like me, or, you know, like my religion, and I honored the woman that I am, and so thank you for being that role model.
That's very kind of you. Very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
See, I'm not the only disruptor in the crowd. I love it. Were you going to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say that, I was going to say the same thing, that, you know, we have to be the people who shake things up right? Which is part of why we are doing what we're doing, is
Mhm.
to support each other for these difficult conversations so that we are empowered to have them with leadership and those who we need to have them, who are in positions who can make the changes happen. So,
Absolutely.
so we do have a couple of questions here in the chat.
Can
If
I
I
say
can,
something before we go there?
absolutely, absolutely.
It's also very important for to build a coalition. You know, if we take the example of the school that does not acknowledge Muslim holidays, build a coalition of the Jewish, Christian, and other people who feel like if we are walking the walk of being inclusive, those holidays, all holidays need to be acknowledged, etc. I can tell you, working in corporate America, I mean, I love Christmas and I love Christmas trees, but to acknowledge one holiday and not everyone else's that's under that umbrella of that organization feels, well, you know, my Christian colleagues are more appreciated than me, because I don't get that validation that I really matter by even saying something about my holiday. So it's really important, and it's important to walk the walk, not just talk it. Talking the talk can get a lot of organizations in deep trouble. And that is a concern that I personally have about all the different companies and organizations that put out statement about Black Lives Matter, right? I could see it, that it's talk the talk for many. And, you know, maybe they have good intentions, but I can only see EOC complaints about how they're not delivering on their word and using their statement as, hey, here's what they said and here's what's happening. So employers need to be really careful with what they say and how they say it, and do they really mean it, or is it just check the box, I put out a statement?
All right, so I'm just going to go down and read. So the first question we have here: are there accommodations that may conflict with practices of other religions?
I don't think so. I mean, if we're providing a conference room for people to be tucked away and do their 5-minute prayer for Muslims, it does not infringe on anybody else. You know, when we talk about Ramadan and Muslims fasting from dawn to sunset, if we have a lunch meeting, you know, right now everybody's virtual, so that's not an issue. But we are, when we're hopefully back together again, if there's a lunch meeting, you know, be sensitive towards people who are fasting and not bringing lunch, or maybe not having a lunch meeting during that month. And also being aware of the dietary laws of Muslims. Muslims are not allowed to eat pork or consume alcohol. So do we provide Muslims with options, you know, vegetarian option, a fish option? You know, nowadays with everybody being so health conscious in what they eat, and being vegetarian, being gluten-free, being all this, it's important to recognize the dietary restrictions that people have. I was working with a client, and they reached a safety milestone, and they wanted to celebrate. So they brought like pizzas out of the gazoo. They brought tens of pizzas out, and they put them all together. And, you know, some had pepperoni, some were vegetarian, some were the whole gamut. And the Muslim employees just stood there, and they weren't going to eat because their pizzas with vegetarian or cheese or what have you was next to the pepperoni, and there could be cross-contamination. So somebody noticed that and said, hey, what's going on? How come you're not eating? And they said, well, there could be cross-contamination. I don't feel comfortable eating. So all they had to do was to bring another table and move the non-meat ones on that other table. And so it's just very simple, but it takes communication and getting to know what works and what doesn't for the different groups of employees that we have.
So similar. So my mom worked before she retired for a major company in the US, and about 20 years ago, they were going out for a holiday party, and they decided to go to a steakhouse. Well, we are Hindus and we don't eat beef. And so my mom, when she got the invitation to go, she went to HR and she said, hey, so how does this work? I'm Hindu, I don't eat beef. And it's all about communication because they didn't know. Not only did they not know her religion, because of course, just like Muslims, there are some who eat pork and some who drink, just like that Hindus, there are some who eat beef. And they apologized and immediately changed up the venue, you know, and it's all about communication. I think in everything that we do in life, it's all about communication, respectful communication, because I start from a place of no one wants to be malicious. No one's being mean, right? They may not know, but how are we going to change and teach them unless we have those modes of communication? And so immediately, like I said, they changed and everyone had a great time. You know, no one squabbled. No one said, well, we wanted to go here and why this? They understood.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the whole thing. It's all about that level of communication and education that comes with it.
Absolutely. And a prerequisite to that is having a safe environment.
Yes.
Right? So if I'm a Muslim, and I think there was a question in the chat saying, what is your recommendation when you get pushback or are denied reasonable accommodations? What are the next steps? And how to escalate? Well, it all depends on what the situation is, right? And how important is that to you? And how important is your job to you? Those are all things that you need to be thinking about. And maybe this is not the employer that you need to be staying with, and you need to look for somewhere else. So it's not as easy as, you know, yes or no, black and white, but it's more, there are a lot of variables there. I think it's Nicolay, right? So yeah, so just assess the situation you're in, see what you're willing and not willing to give up, and how much sleepless nights you might want to have, like, because when you do file an AOC complaint, then it might not be, it could be covert retaliation that's not very visible. So just be careful how you proceed.
Yeah, and those things take a long time to resolve, but it's something that people have access to and a right to if they feel like they are being discriminated against or retaliated against. And I'm learning so much. This is such great conversation. I appreciate you. I know that there is another question. I think we touched on it a little bit from the chat, but what are some factors that prevent people from opening up to those other religions or having them be allowed in the workplace? So how do we kind of overcome that?
Wow. You know, we need to be focused on the business case for the organization. They need the best talent to do whatever it is that they're doing. And again, going back to getting the best talent, but if an organization gets the best talent and the culture is not there to support that best talent, then it's going to be a revolving door. They're going to come in, they're going to realize how not a fit it is. And that's why it's really important to have realistic job previews. And in that way, employees understand the environment, know what's going on, et cetera, because the employer and the employee need to make a decision whether that's a good fit or not. And it's a choice in terms of having a welcoming culture. It's a choice. And usually when it's a welcoming culture and it's a diverse culture and it's managed well, then those organizations that have the diverse workforce and they're managed well, they way outperform their counterparts who have a very monolithic workforce. And that data has been proven over and over again. So it's really important to look at what's best for the organization in most situations is to bring on a diverse workforce and manage it well. Now, I also wanted to talk about something that is, it's important, and that is that modesty is very important in Islam. And modesty is in dress, and it's also all between relations between people of different genders. So the modesty in Islam for women, and it's their choice, is to cover all the way from head to toe, except for the hands and the face to be shown. Some Muslim women do it, and a lot don't. And it all depends on how they interpret being modest. And it does not mean that a person wearing the head cover is more religious than a person who doesn't. It's not about appearances, it's what's inside a person. It's also in terms of gender relations. In the workplace, many Muslims, men and women, might not be comfortable shaking hands with somebody from the opposite gender. And the way they do it is that when somebody shakes hand with them, if we were in real life, I would stand up in front of all of you and I will get Tom to help me out and come and shake my hand. And then Tom, let's act it out virtually. Okay, so go ahead and shake my hands here.
It's okay, no.
All right, I got the volume. Let's do it.
Okay, so go ahead and try to shake my hands here like we're in the same room.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tom. Very nice to meet you.
Tom, did y'all see what I did? I put my hand on my heart and I would say, Tom, it's so nice to meet you as well, right? How did that make you feel, Tom?
I was 100% okay with that.
Okay. Well,
I mean, a little bit, you know, like, so, of course, I knew what we were doing. So let me go out of knowing what was going on and saying, I'm just meeting you for the first time. You know, I imagine my initial reaction would be not knowing anything. Why didn't you reach out?
right, right.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily take offense to it, especially if, you know, I would judge the rest of the body language.
Right.
You know, if the rest of the body language was like, you know, big eyes, eyebrows pop open, you know, it's like, oh, how dare you touch me, as opposed to the way you did it, which was very, you know, very friendly, very smiling, very inviting, you know, would right away drop my wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
And get it more into the acceptance level, not
Right.
knowing anything about what was appropriate or not appropriate.
Exactly. So I love what Rebecca said. Rebecca said, let's hope shaking hands is just over. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Rebecca, I think you're absolutely right. This is the silver lining for Muslims with COVID-19, right? So people don't shake hands anymore. And not only that, people cover their face. So Muslims who do, women who choose to cover their face, they're in great company right now. Everybody's doing the same thing. Yeah, but it's about physical contact and being modest. That's the reason behind it. So just being aware of that, and hopefully COVID will be over with soon. And, you know, we will go back to being together. The other thing about modesty in Islam is eye contact. Some Muslims, again, the Muslims are very, 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 very diverse, different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, different education differences in so many different things. But one thing that they might interpret a modesty as is that having eye contact with the opposite gender. They might not look the person in the eye. And so within the US cultural context, that's looked upon as they're lying or hiding something, they're not sure of themselves, etc. So just, you know, understand that it's not what we think it is. It's actually, from their perspective, is showing more respect to the person that they are dealing with.
So going along with all this that you've been mentioning the last few minutes, Soumaya, what is the company's responsibility for cultural trainings? So obviously, you know, if you're educated, you're around a very diverse group of people, you know certain things, but you tend to know the big things, right? Muslims don't eat pork and don't, you know, the alcohol. The whole shaking hands thing, while I knew that, I loved the demonstration that you gave. But how do people learn about these? What's the corporation's responsibility for these cultural trainings?
Right. You know, it's the cultural trainings help put tools in their toolboxes, right? And a lot of times people, employees are offended. You know, Tom was such a sport. He didn't, you know, he says, oh, you know, your body language was good, so I didn't take, you know, much of it. But sometimes problems do happen because somebody tried to shake hands with them, you know, with me, for instance, and I do shake hands, by the way, but some people don't. And they will say, oh, I'm offended, I'm not going to work with her anymore. You know, just doesn't want to acknowledge me, etc. So even though it seems like it's so small on the surface, but it could have really deep repercussions on people. So it's important to understand. And if there isn't a culture that's allowing people to talk about, hey, here's why I did this, or here's why I did that, and having that safe space to share. and not being labeled. And at times, the employees themselves are not comfortable sharing. So having someone who could come in and explain the different cultures. And again, religion is only one layer. As human beings, we have so many different layers. Our upbringing, where we were born, our socioeconomic class, what is considered okay and not okay to do within cultures. One of the things that I remember is one time I had this lady who was originally from Africa, and we were talking about not knowing, right? She says, well, I grew up in a culture where we could not whistle in the house. That was a big no-no, that her grandmother said nobody whistles in the house. And she said, I went on all my years, and she must have been like in her 40s or something, and I just didn't whistle, but I did not know why. And later on, she finds out it's because there is a belief within her tribe is that whistling brings in the evil into the house. And that's why they did not whistle in the house. So, and that's, you know, a person in their own family, their traditions, and they just do it and don't know why. So I think the more that we talk to each other, the more that we have an environment that's safe to speak about differences and commonalities, that is encouraged by the culture of our organization, some of those barriers will be broken down. But at times that's not enough. Training needs to happen to bring everybody on the same page. Let's talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was gonna see, I didn't see any other questions or things in the chat, so just was gonna see if
I'm gonna
anybody
cut you
had
off. I
any.
got one in there.
Oh, you got one in there?
Oh, did I miss it? Oh, you sure do. All right. Do you want to ask it?
Yeah, I don't mind. I was typing it out while the conversation was going on, so I didn't interrupt.
I did see it. I'm sorry, Tom.
So at what point in the hiring or employment process should accommodations be addressed? Is that something during the interview process that HR should be taking that on and saying, hey, do you have any accommodations? And making that a general question for 100% of the people that come through? Or is that the responsibility of the employee, you know, while they're being interviewed, the question wasn't asked, I should bring this up so I don't get hired, and later on I bring it up and it's a problem? Or is it something that should not be part of the interview process, and so that it's not held against you, and it's something that's brought up post-hire?
Yeah, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? So if reasonable accommodation comes up and the person says, hey, I'm a Muslim and I pray, and et cetera, and they don't get hired, guess what's going to happen? You gotta, as an employer, you gotta reply to the complaint from the EEOC and prove that that wasn't because he or she was a Muslim or whatever faith tradition that needed reasonable accommodations. So, you know, I don't know what is the good time to do that. I really don't. But I know that once the employee is hired and they ask for a reasonable accommodation, then the employer must put in a good faith effort to be able to provide those reasonable accommodations. I would personally, from an HR standpoint, I would be very scared to ask about those things, whether it's ADA or whether it's religion or anything else, because again, if that person is not hired, then it creates a reason why they would file a complaint and whatever else. I don't know. What do y'all think? Tiffany, Simone, what do y'all think?
I agree. I coach my leaders and when I've done interview training with people to just kind of stay away from that. However, you want people to feel welcome. So if they're sharing that, then now it's kind of like they put you on notice. And so you have to do something with that. And I think one key point too is one of the things when I asked the question about barriers before is because in my experience, I've seen that people think cost is going to be a barrier or there's going to be some other physical barrier, but it doesn't have to be expensive. And one myth is that people employers will think that they have to do whatever it is that's asked for, whether that's ADA or religious or other accommodations, and that's not the case. People don't just get to be carte blanche. It has to make sense, and you have to, there's a business case for it, right? You have to be able to make that, and it has to be reasonable.
Yes.
So that's one of the distinctions that's really important too that I wanted to call out.
Yeah, the key word here is reasonable. The key word here is reasonable. Yeah.
And one of the things that I coach my clients with is to ask those questions once an offer has been extended, right? Once an offer has been extended, the ball is in your court to decide if you want to accept the position or not. It's pretty rare that an offer has been pulled back. And then, if it is pulled back after you've asked about reasonable accommodations, then you definitely have grounds to stand on for an EEOC complaint, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's probably the better time to ask about what accommodations you need and if the organization can support that.
Yeah. Now there are a couple of comments here from Sarah.
Yep.
We have an accommodation request form and touch on it during onboarding. And then Danielle has another comment. Y'all want to read that?
Sure. So Daniele says, instead of bringing up specific accommodation requests, could people just try to understand the cultural openness of the employee during the interview?
What does cultural openness of the employee during the interview mean, I wonder?
You want to clarify for us, Daniele?
Yes, I was just trying to understand whether there could be, some proxies that interviewee can ask, or some aspects that interviewee can, can understand as a way to see if future accommodations requests are welcomed, or the how the employee will try to tackle that.
Yeah, that's a great point. One thing about practicing religion, it's not a cultural thing. These are requirements that people who choose to adhere to a faith tradition, they have to do. So it's not optional. If a person practices it, it's not optional. If a person does not eat pork because of religious reasons, it's not optional. Even if a person does not eat it because of health reason, it's not optional. So I would be very careful with that one. And just make sure that the employer knows about the distinction between the two.
All right, so it looks like we're coming up to about the 1 hour mark. I didn't know if there were any other questions, or Soumaya, if you had any other comments that you wanted to make. One of the things that Tiffany and I do, and we ask our guest speaker, is to stay a little bit after when we turn the recording off. So if people have questions that they wanted to ask afterwards, that's fine as well. But if you had any closing comments or other points you wanted to make.
Sure. So American Muslims are your colleagues, your neighbors, and we are doing here in Atlanta, in Georgia, the 100 influential Georgia Muslims, and we're putting together that list. And it's just a really incredible list of individuals, very, very high achieving folks. And given the diversity of our country, we must, as employers, be very open and create an environment and a culture that welcomes everyone. Talking to the employees and understanding what their needs are, and don't generalize, right? Not all Muslims pray, not all Muslims fast, and some Muslims eat pork, and some Muslims drink alcohol. So just understanding what it is that the Muslims are supposed to do, and keep that tucked away in the back of the mind, and be ready to talk about and be able to put in place reasonable accommodations for them. That will go a long way. And again, showcasing the diversity that is in your workplace and walking the walk, making an environment where everyone feels inclusive. Acknowledge holidays, acknowledge people, and I believe that will go a long way for your business.
Thank you. That's awesome.
That's a great way to end the conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Tiffany, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just real quick on the holidays, because I do think that that is such a big thing. And I've gotten that question from employees like, well, I don't celebrate Christmas. What about me? So that I'm so glad that that came up today, because that is so common in the workplace. And thank you for giving us that tip, as well as everything else. We're so grateful to have you today. And I'm just grateful for everybody who's here too, and who will watch the replay.
And can I just make a comment? What's funny is if you travel around the world, even Muslim countries, we honor and celebrate Christmas.
Good times.
But in America, where we're like creating diversity and inclusion, we don't honor, like, you know, when I'm in like in the summer, as being a professor in the summer, I travel and I go to Europe every summer. And I remember one year it was Eid, and I was in England, and you got signs, oh, you know, Eid Mubarak, here's an Eid gift. And I was like, you know, it made my heart feel so good, like, you know, like that being honored. And then it makes me sad, and I'm like, but where I live and where I love is not, I can't even, like, you know, get an acknowledgement of my father passing, you know, because they don't know what to do. Look it up online, you know. So I do want to put that out there as too. So like other countries do honor Christmas. You know, we have a holiday break in Pakistan. I'm from Pakistan. In Dubai as well. I travel there in the month of December. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just like over the top for this conversation, because I've never had this conversation to be able to say this stuff publicly. So I thank y'all so much.
Thank you for joining us, Rubina. I'm so glad that you're here and that this conversation is happening. It's fantastic. All right, so I think we'll stop the recording in a couple of minutes, but thank you everyone who's here live and everyone who's going to watch on the replay. And we'll see you all next Friday. Next Friday is an unrecorded session. And so people who want to come and have conversations in an extra safe space are more than welcome to join us. We will have sort of a recap of this month's guest speakers and any other conversation anyone wants to have next Friday, unrecorded session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.